One of my most anticipated movies of the year is Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. Finally got around to seeing it, wanted to give you my thoughts, but like always, before I get into it, welcome back to The Haunted Beard, everybody. My name is Jake. Thanks again for joining me. It's all horror and thriller movie content here on my channel, so listen, do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard. After a Black Friday riot ends in tragedy, a mysterious Thanksgiving-inspired killer terrorizes Plymouth, Massachusetts, the birthplace of the infamous holiday. And I think I can summarize my overall thoughts on Thanksgiving pretty succinctly in that if you're a slasher fan in general, I think this is going to quench your bloodthirst and give you enough to where you will enjoy it and it's at least worth a watch. If you're not much of a slasher fan, this is probably not going to win you over, as the issues I have with this are pretty much in line with the issues that a lot of people might have with slasher movies, and that you don't really get any sort of character depth and the acting is not great. So if you're able to set those things aside and all you're really here for are some bloody, gory kills, I think you're going to have a good time, as the kills here are actually pretty great, but just don't expect much more than that when it comes to Thanksgiving. I think the opening of the film works pretty well, as Eli Roth kind of has this big set piece where there is this Black Friday massacre, more or less, where you get this angry mob of people breaking down the doors on this, it's called Riot Mart, but it's basically like a Walmart type of store, and all hell breaks loose. People get killed in the just mass insanity and chaos. And this scene is presented in a way, at least I found it to be very darkly comedic, and I think Eli Roth has a pretty dark and disturbing sense of humor here, so that's definitely on display, and I think it is on display throughout various parts of the rest of the film. I think he directs the sequence fairly well. There is some pretty gnarly kills here, and one of the big-name actors gets killed as well, which was definitely an unexpected moment, and so it starts off pretty well. Also, too, Roth is adding in a little bit of commentary on sort of big corporations and corporate greed and stuff like that. And so there is a little bit of, I guess, social commentary in the movie along those lines that Roth definitely beats you over the head with. It's very overplayed, but I think that's mainly the intent. And as I just kind of mentioned, it's really just the character work and some of the writing and the dialogue and the acting is just really not all that great overall. Our main cast of characters is led by Jessica and her group of friends, and she's really the only person in the entire movie where you really get any sort of character depth with, and there's really not that much. She is someone that you find out has lost her mom and is dealing with some tension between her and her new stepmother, and so that kind of causes just some drama and tension there. But outside of that, there's not really any sort of character depth or development or growth whatsoever to speak of. A lot of the characters here are just very shallow. A lot of them are just kind of obnoxious and dumb, and you're kind of hoping that they get their comeuppance. And so there is an element of that kind of works. It makes it more entertaining, I guess, when people that you want to get killed. And so sometimes having dumb characters like that works for the film's benefit, and it does a little bit here in this case. I also have to say, too, in terms of the characters and mainly the acting, this movie takes place in Massachusetts, and so you have some characters doing the Boston accent and some of them not. And then some of the ones who do, it's like they very clearly will drop the Boston accent like through part way through a sentence and then pick it back up again. And Patrick Dempsey is the worst offender of this. There's seriously like sentences where he will like pick it up and lose the Boston accent in one sentence. And yeah, it's not great. And I also think just the overall story is pretty standard, par for the course, right? You've got a mass killer going around town, killing people, and we find out that the people it's targeting are the ones who were involved in this Black Friday massacre. And so for the most part, it's just the police trying to figure out who it is, and our main group of high schoolers are trying to also figure out who the killer is, but mainly just stay alive. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Nothing we really haven't seen before. The thing that I think elevates Thanksgiving at least a little bit above your basic average slasher are the kills. The kills here are pretty great. You do get just some gnarly blood and gore, some really top-notch kills. And so, like I said, if you're here for the kills, you're definitely going to be satisfied. Just don't expect much more than that. And so being that there's not really a whole lot more to add to this movie outside of the cool kills, you're kind of just waiting for the killer to show back up. You're just kind of waiting for the next kill scene. But when the kill scenes arrive, it does deliver. There are some just really top-notch and memorable kills that I quite enjoyed. Part of the whole finale sequence, I'll just call it sort of the Thanksgiving dinner sequence, I thought was great and one of the best horror scenes of the year. So that really was top-notch and stood out for me. I quite enjoyed that whole sequence. And then I will say the ending is, it's okay. It didn't quite land for me. I'm going to get into some spoilers here regarding the ending, so if you haven't seen this yet and don't want it to be spoiled, go ahead and just skip to the timestamp in the video. But I did want to kind of give a little bit more of my thoughts regarding the ending. So here we go, you have been warned. Now, in regards to the ending, obviously we find out that Patrick Dempsey, the police officer, is the Thanksgiving killer, and I don't really have any issue with that reveal. He was one of the guys that I kind of had in the back of my mind that I suspected, so I don't really have an issue with him being the killer. I just really have an issue with kind of how the final climactic sequence plays out in terms of his performance specifically. And that, man, he is really hamming it up here. It's very silly and over the top and just ridiculous. And also, too, and this is probably a nitpick, but it did bother me a little bit, so I'll mention it. But the logistics of how the ending plays out is also really ridiculous, as the amount of things that would need to happen exactly perfectly for it to play out the way it did it's a bit of a stretch, as he has to leave the cabin where he's got everybody locked in to follow Jessica back. So, he gets back in his police car, and Jessica flees from the cabin, goes through the woods, and gets back to the town. And she stumbles upon him unconscious right outside his cop car. And so he somehow has to perfectly predict where she's going to come out of the woods, that she's going to stumble upon him. And then also, too, he had to capture and drug Bobby and put him in the Thanksgiving, the John Carver mask, and then let him loose in the warehouse so that Jessica could, again, get there, find his unconscious body, and then see Bobby standing there outside of the warehouse and then go in to pursue him. Like, there's just so many little details of things that would have to go exactly right for that whole thing to happen. It's a bit of a stretch, like I said, but, it is probably a nitpick, but it did bother me a little bit. So anyways, those are my main issues with the ending. So overall, so like I said, Thanksgiving's got some really top-notch kills, really memorable ones. I was all here for it. I quite enjoyed it, but the rest of the movie is pretty standard, average stuff, and so I kind of was just waiting for the next kill scene to happen so I could get some good entertainment out of it. There's also a good climax with the whole Thanksgiving dinner scene with everybody together. But like I said, overall, it's fairly average and elevated a little bit above that just because I think the kills are so great. So I'm going to be up. It's probably a little generous, but I'm going to go 6 out of 10 for Thanksgiving. So those are my thoughts. Like always, hit me up down below. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on Thanksgiving and let me know. I'd love to hear from you. That's all I got. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.